This is Nursing Uncensored. I'm your host, Adrianne Benning, and I invite you to listen in on conversations I've had with real nurses about the crazy and wonderful lives we lead. This podcast is meant to create laughter in addition to serious discussion, and nothing is off limits. We're always honest, but we're not always safe for work. Please listen responsibly. Welcome to Nursing Uncensored. Today I am with Jenny Finnell. She is a Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetist. That is quite the mouthful, and it's quite the job too. So let's actually let's start this up. Jenny, hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Adrianne. I'm excited to be here.
Happy to have you here. So I've got so many questions. This is so exciting to me because, as I was saying to you just a moment ago off the air, I know a little bit about your job, but I don't know enough to not be super curious. Like, I'm super curious. So I know we have a lot of students listening and a lot of nurses that maybe haven't worked in the OR. The OR to me is like this strange and mystical place where things happen and I don't get to see, and like there's a red line, so when I take my patients I don't get to go past that magical red line. So I would love for you to take all of us past that red line that we're not supposed to cross and tell us about your perspective, your job. I want to hear about all of it. So first, will you just give like the basic kind of overview, and then I'd love to back it up and talk about where this all started for you.
Sure, yes. So a typical day, now this can vary quite a bit depending on where you work. There's various settings you can provide anesthesia in. So I'll kind of go through some of those because not a lot of people are aware that we practice anywhere outside of operating rooms.
Oh, yeah.
But we do. We have quite a few. So one of those places could be an endoscopy clinic. They could be what we call off-site, which could be IR or CT, MRI. We can provide anesthesia for those patients going through those procedures. We also can do pain clinics, which people also don't realize. So they even have something now, it's kind of the new fad, is what they call ketamine clinics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for people who are dealing with like withdrawal-like symptoms or depression even. We provide anesthesia for what they call EMGs, which is electromagnetic, where they kind of like shock you a little bit for like chronic depression. And you can even go work at a dental clinic. And provide anesthesia for dental procedures. So there's a wide variety of types of anesthesia. You can do pediatrics, OB, and I probably don't know how much terminology I should use.
I mean, you can let her rip because people
okay.
tell me they don't know what we're talking about. They look things up, and that's
okay. Perfect. Okay.
So go for it.
Okay. We do anywhere from neuro, so like craniotomies or big back cases. We do open heart, and there's a variety of open heart cases, which I spent 4.5 years doing. There's something called a TAVR procedure.
Oh, yeah. I know what that is. That's a trans-aortic valve replacement, right?
Correct. Yep. Correct. And they go through a little incision in your groin. Believe it or not, we do those under MAC anesthetic, which a MAC anesthetic is monitored anesthesia care. So we kind of put them in a little twilight zone is what we also tell patients. Mm-hmm. It's a very safe procedure, but if something does go wrong, it's can be quite bad. So we also do something called a mini thoracotomy, where we do open heart under just a mini thoracotomy. So they have a much smaller chest incision, so they don't have a midline sternotomy. We do, thoracotomies, so lobectomies. We do ortho, any kind of ortho. It could be trigger fingers, carpal tunnels, all the way from shoulder replacements, knee replacements. I can keep going.
Yeah, no, but that's just it. That's so much. The types of patients that you are describing that I would be taking care of post-surgically are like those thoracotomy patients. I have floated and taken care of like cabbage, the open sternotomy patients and whatnot. So I've dealt with little pieces of that, but yeah, I didn't know. I didn't even dawn on me, even though I've taken family members to and from endoscopy and MRI, didn't even dawn on me. But yes, you guys are everywhere, really, even if maybe we should recognize that. We should recognize you guys. You guys are everywhere.
Yeah, it is a very wide scope of practice. And I think I've had numerous people tell me like, oh, is your profession boring? Oh, just do the same thing all the time. And that is a very common misconception. And I think maybe if you only see a small brief period of the operating room, you may think that, but there's so many things going on behind that screen that you're not aware of. The fact that we're always listening. Even if I'm not physically watching the surgery, I'm listening for what kind of sutures they're calling for. I'm listening for suctioning. I'm listening for the surgeon, maybe struggling and maybe he just hit something, or maybe he can't access the tumor. So he has to go to plan B, which is a totally different operation. I'm always listening for what the circulator is asking for. Is she sending something for frozen? Well, I can't wake a patient up. They're not closing. Sometimes you have to wait on a frozen to come back before you wake the patient up. There's always something. In the meantime, you're still managing their vital signs. So if a surgeon's compressing the aorta, you're going to have a major decrease in return to the heart. So you're going to be managing those symptoms so the surgeon can keep working safely and so the patient's stable throughout. And sometimes you work really, really hard to do that. And what I find so rewarding about my job, and sure, there's easy cases where everything goes really fine and straightforward, but you also have those easy cases where all of a sudden the patient bagels down to a heart rate of 20 and you have to tell a surgeon to stop immediately and to treat him with atropine or Robenal or ephedrine or something like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so sometimes you can anticipate a very challenging case like a ruptured aorta, or you can have a lap chole, and both things don't necessarily always have to go smooth, or they can. So yeah, it's a very vast
So you have to be paying attention all the time, which I don't say that in like you have to pay attention, but like in a very good way. You have to be very present in what you're doing and very much a part of the rhythm of the team.
Yes. I love how you said team, because it definitely is a team effort to get someone through anesthesia.
Absolutely. And, I think that I actually had the experience just last night of transferring a patient. I followed an ICU nurse. I'm currently training in the ICU. We had to bring a patient who is intubated, sedated from the cardiac cath lab back to the ICU. And so just thinking of the amount of people it took for us to transfer that patient from the table, for lack of a better word, that the patient was on for the cath procedure, the imaging. I have not been around cath labs very much, just kind of in and out, but just looking at all of the machines and the imaging software and the number of people it takes just to get that person into position, let alone do the procedure, is pretty overwhelming at times. So I imagine you guys, especially if you're working with the same people over and over, like anywhere, you get to know each other, you get to know the rhythms. And do you get to know kind of the procedures, oh, this is kind of the basic thing that we're going for? And of course there's always variation, but you've kind of got this expectation that everybody's reaching for.
Yes. You definitely tend to know what to kind of expect the more you do it. But like you said, there's always a slight variation, or maybe based on the patient's own health history, you're going to be doing something a little bit differently.
Sure.
For example, if they're too sick for general anesthetic, you may have to kind of try to do a MAC anesthetic on a procedure you normally would do a general anesthetic, or even lighten your anesthetic to the point where the patient can not be so hypotensive with the procedure, like a patient with critical AS, aortic stenosis. So yeah, there's always adjustments, but for the most part, you get familiar with certain procedures or the setup, and for the most part, do this similar style of anesthetic.
Sure. So I want to put the brakes on this and reverse it really fast. I want to go all the way back to the beginning, where you started having these thoughts of maybe I could be a CRNA. What was that like? What kinds of things turned you on to this? And what were your first steps when you realized this was something that was in your crosshairs?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and an area that a lot of people are always inquiring about. So I think what I want to start by saying is that everyone has their own journey into this profession. I work with a lot of second career CRNAs. I work with people who, again, have maybe gone back for dentistry and changed their mind. So just so you know, it doesn't necessarily mean there's one pathway to do this. But kind of how I started was I always knew nursing was something I was interested in because I love the hands-on care aspect of it. I love being the one there at the bedside, comforting and taking care of my patients. And that part of nursing always really fascinated me, and I just knew I would enjoy it. So kind of fast forward all the way to like my junior year in nursing school. I was fortunate enough to get a day in the operating room shadowing just to kind of, and it wasn't for the CRNA, I just had a day in the operating room. But that told, and I had heard of CRNA and I knew it was a good profession. And just like most people, I thought, oh, they make a lot of money. Like that was pretty much what I knew about it.
Yep.
Before I had my OR experience. I'm like, oh, that's a great profession. To be really smart to do it, you make a lot of money. But I never consider myself smart enough. I never consider myself being able to accomplish something like that. Cause I just thought I wasn't good enough for that career path, back during that time. I even tried to talk myself out of doing CRNA for over a year. I even looked at becoming a PA and other aspects. And I finally was like, you know what, Jenny, I have to try because I really want this. But I gravitated towards the CRNA that day. And I was like really fascinated. I'm like, I didn't realize they did everything that I saw them doing. And so I pretty much stayed back with them, and I didn't really ask a lot of questions. I was mostly observing. I was shy. I was nervous. I was intimidated, to say the least. But I still, nonetheless, was like, wow, this is so cool. Like I just saw them do the airway. Now they're drawing up some drugs. I don't know what those are, but they're pushing it and they know what they're doing. And they're not asking permission to do any of these things. They're just doing it. They're calling the shots. They're talking to the surgeon and telling him what's going on behind the screen so the surgeon can make some adjustments. And I just thought it was so cool. They had all that responsibility, and they also were calm, collected, and they just got it done. And I was also impressed the fact that they were such a patient advocate. And they are an ultimate advocate because the patient is paralyzed, intubated, and sedated. So they have to be the ones speaking up for the patient. So I decided at that moment, I said, I have to look more into this and I have to learn more. I started Googling everything I could.
Nice.
And then I reached out to the program directors. Now I was still in nursing school, but I really wanted it so bad at that point that I, again, reached out, kind of figured out what I needed to do. I just decided I needed to take a graduate level statistics course my senior year in nursing school because it was a prereq. I also lined up a nurse's aide job in the medical ICU, which I did for about a year and a half prior to graduation. And then it helped me get into the externship so I can go straight into the medical ICU after school. Which is where I gained my 3 years of medical ICU experience. I had to take the GRE, which I took twice. I had to take my CCRN. I don't even know. I spent like probably over 6 to 8 months preparing for the interview. And I interviewed at 2 schools, got rejected from one, totally bombed the interview.
Oh, we've all been there. Oh my God.
Right. Yep. Tried to pick myself back up, did it again, and got accepted. So that was kind of my journey, but I guess I just made the decision, despite having my doubts, that I was going to give it my best shot and I was going to try.
And look at what would have happened. What would have happened if you had just given up after that first time? Look at this thing that that you're like, I don't know if I can do it, but now here you are.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that speaks volumes because we do spend a lot of time like talking ourselves out of things, psyching ourselves out. And one of the things that I heard just recently that I liked the way it was worded and it kind of stuck with me was in nursing, the only way you fail is if you stop.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
And so I think I want my listeners to really like hear and focus on that message for a second of like, you only fail if you stop. And if you had stopped after that first interview, I mean, everybody has those moments where they have that interview that's like really something they want desperately or passionately, and you have so much invested in it that you kind of like overflow all over it, like it doesn't go the way you planned. But you know what? If you come back a second time, you came back, I'm sure, much stronger with a lot of, knowing not only what to do, but what not to do. And yeah, I think that's a really important message to drive home.
Yes. And I will say on your point, as far as you don't fail until you stop, or you don't fail until you stop trying, or you don't I really think that, and I've talked to program directors, and I've been trying to reach out to program directors to kind of see how I can help guide students that I now work with. And an overwhelming theme that I'm getting, and now keep in mind, all programs are a little different, but the vast majority of them, the thing they care about the most is emotional intelligence and kind of like what I call kind of grit. And grit is something that can pull you through a challenging situation. It's facing your failures and your fears and still going for it. It's something that's kind of inherent. And I actually think people who have more struggles in their life tend to have a lot of grit because they've had to overcome a lot of challenges, and it makes you a stronger person for it. So I just don't want any of you to lose hope. If you have some setbacks, know that everyone, no matter what they're posting on social media, they're going to have setbacks too. They may not be sharing it. And all schools are different. So the one school who turned me down, they did a heavy personal interview and emotional intelligence interview. And okay, so I didn't do good on that style interview. Where the next interview I had, they had a few personal questions, but they hit me heavy with pathophys and pharm. And I thrived in that environment because I could study for it. And I enjoy pathophys and pharm. I love it, in fact. So I had no problem studying for that interview. And not that I got everything correct. I definitely, I remember them saying, like, where are platelets made? And I go, liver. Like, I literally said it like that. And they didn't give me a chance to think about my answer. And they're like, okay, move on. How does citrate work? And I'm like, oh, I think I should have said bone marrow. But I didn't have time to even think back. I just had to keep going. And so it's not like I got everything right. But it was enough to get in.
Yeah. Well, and I think that when you're in interviews like that, especially when a program or job or whatever you're going after is competitive, they do have to throw in some stuff that maybe 75% of people won't get that right, but maybe they expect that and they just want to see how you perform, in that environment. So yeah, and you can still be a strong candidate, even if nobody's going to know everything. And in that circumstance, you would use your resources around you,
And I still don't know everything, and I still
right.
make mistakes, and I still say things wrong sometimes. I'm like, oh, Jenny, but it's just, we're all human. And I think it's important to, again, give yourself some grace. And if you're looking to go into this profession, to know that every day you have to give yourself grace, because it can be a stressful, just like nursing in general, it's a stressful career path. But you have what it takes. We all do. And it just comes down to how badly you want it and how much grit you're willing to put into it. I know people who have tried for years and they even give up and then go back. I met someone who actually tried a couple times, didn't get in, got defeated, gave up, went back, but then decided to try again and got in like the whole second years and years later.
Because where you are in your life is very important too. It doesn't mean that you're not capable. Maybe, maybe you took a course load that was too heavy. Maybe there was too much going on in your personal life. I know many people as well that maybe they took a break or this was their second career. But I know so many capable nurses that thought that at some point they thought that they maybe weren't going to make it. And now they're these strong clinicians. And that's what I wanted to speak to as well, because you were saying that like you were looking, and I've had the same feeling, you're looking at these professionals that like this anesthetist when you're in school and thinking like she looks confident, or they, he, she, whoever it was, they look confident. They don't look scared. They look like they are very knowledgeable. And you don't go from that from the day you enter, you just switch over. We all know we have to grow into these roles. And if we think back to our first days in any kind of clinical setting, I'm sure we all were, all thumbs and awkward. So I think there's something to be said about like giving yourself the grace and the time to grow into that. And you still have to work really hard, but you don't have to become that perfectly. Maybe that person, has had years of experience. And the reason they look so cool, calm, and collected is because they've been through every emergency, oh shit, situation that's ever happened in an OR, We're kind of on this path. You're talking about these great qualities that make good CRNAs. We've talked about being a good listener, paying attention, being an advocate, having this like grit and this emotional intelligence. I think these are really important characteristics. And so far, we haven't mentioned anything that requires a particular level of discipline or education. Like that can be earned or that can be learned and
Correct.
obtained. But
Yep. You can
yeah,
always
so
learn. I will take a student any day who's hardworking over someone who just knows textbook information.
yeah. Yeah, you
And
got
I
to
think
have
we
the
all
heart.
probably feel that way.
So when you realize that this is something that looks really cool and you want to do that, how does one begin the process of even figuring out how to do? So obviously you have to have your bachelor's. This is graduate level education.
Correct.
But
BSN, it doesn't matter if you get your ADN first and then your BSN. It doesn't matter if you have a BA in, say, chemistry and go back for an accelerated BSN. It doesn't matter what pathway you take. I've had people also ask me about the possibility of getting their MSN and then going back. You can do that. I don't recommend that because it ends up being more wasteful and time consuming.
yeah.
Because there's some courses that won't transfer and it's expensive to get your MSN.
Mhm. Yes, it is.
But you can. We've had nurse practitioners go back for CRNA. So yeah, there's multiple pathways. But starting in 2022, all programs will be changing over to a DNP, and the vast majority already are. There are a handful of master's degree programs left, and the biggest difference between the two, other than the fact that DNP, you do, a big research project for the most part for that almost entire first year. It's a difference between about 7 to 8 months. So it's really not like I say DNP and people assume it's an entire year extra, and it's actually not, because a master's program for anesthesia is about 28 to 29 months, where a DNP is 36 months.
So really, I mean, it's and by doing it this way, we're kind of universalizing. Is that a word? Universal?
Yeah,
we're kind of, yeah. So we're all kind of, we're getting you the same level of education. And I know that's very important because as we've had drilled into us by the Institute of Medicine, that we have better outcomes when we have this advanced education. And so, and of course, in this profession, there's so much specific information that I can't even imagine. I'm one of those people that's still looking at your position going, oh my God, I can't even imagine. I don't think I'm smart enough to do that.
Well, I don't even think there's a lot of days I still question sometimes, I mean, I think that's just human nature. And I think you're always your own worst critic too. So I think you have to own that. But yeah, I think people should start by kind of narrowing down what schools they're interested in, whether that's because of location or cost or their attrition rate, attrition rate is how many candidates get accepted versus how many candidates actually graduate. A high attrition rate correlates with students either dropping out or being asked to leave. There's also board passing rates you have to look at. Some schools have, in order to maintain accreditation, schools have to have an 84% first-time board passing rate, 80% first-time board passing rate for a consecutive amount of years. So some schools may dip down to 74% on the first time board passing rate, and then like the next year come back up to, 84%, or whatever it may be. Like the program I went to rarely ever gets much below a 92% board passing rate the first time. So those are all factors you want to consider when picking your school, because the worst thing you want to do is pick a school who consecutively gets lower board passing rates and then be in the middle of the program and have it not get reaccredited, and then you're left without a degree.
And all that time and money just for naught, basically.
Oh my gosh, yes. And then attrition rate too, because you want a school that's going to invest in you. So if a school has a high attrition rate, think long and hard is to maybe try to dig into why that is. Maybe try to find other SRNAs who are currently in the program and get some feedback. Networking is huge. And now I didn't do a ton of networking. I know a lot more now than I knew then. The biggest part of networking I did was I reached out to the program director and sent him my transcripts. Not that I was applying. I just like, hey, can you look over my transcripts and let me know if there's any issues or what I can do to better myself as a candidate for your program. And he openly gave me feedback.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So I would start there. You'd be surprised. A lot of programs are willing to give candidates feedback on that.
And that might put your name on their radar too, in terms of they're like, oh, this name I keep seeing because they're really trying.
Yes.
And now their application is on my desk.
Yep, exactly. Another thing too is what I didn't know about till after I got accepted. was the open house. By the time I found out they had an open house, it was already too late. Like I had already submitted my application. I didn't have the day off work. Where I went to grad school was 2 hours away from where I lived. But every school that I'm at least aware of offers an open house for these programs. Oh my gosh, go to it. I can't stress enough how valuable that's going to be, because you're going to get FaceTime with the program director. You're going to get FaceTime with current students. You're going to get FaceTime with other candidates. I mean, huge, huge value. And it's either free or it's like $25. I mean,
well, and think of that. You can either have all of your question answered there in this great environment where everybody's there prepared to talk about these things, or you can call their phone number to the office and hope somebody gets back to you, which I'm sure they do the best they can, but that sounds like a great opportunity. So people just need to connect with that school that they're interested in and find out when they're doing their open houses.
Yep, that, and then, make sure you get all your credit, like look into what classes they require as far as, do they have prereqs? Do they require chemistry? Because not all nursing schools actually have you take chemistry these days. And most anesthesia programs require organic chemistry. And so like if you only took gen chemistry, you may have to take an organic chemistry before you can even apply. So finding these things out early in the process so you don't backtrack or think, oh, I can't apply this year anymore because now I have to take chemistry, or trying to rush and get your GRE and chemistry and CCRN all done in a month.
And it's just so much nicer to be able to do these things paced and planned rather than like crash landing into an organic chemistry class. That is not something you want to do on the fly. Like you want to mentally prepare for that. Like I'm right now on the eve of starting to like come to grips with like the fact that I have to take a statistics class to get into the program that I'm looking at. So but it's all attainable, but yes, you have to be prepared. You have to get into these classes when they're available. Do programs like this, wait lists, difficulty getting in, depends on the school, I imagine.
So that's another thing. That's why I've been trying to dive into all this, because it's so kind of different depending on the school. But so like for instance, some schools the average GPA is like a 3.7. Some schools the average GPA is a 3.4. Some schools will not consider retaking classes. Some schools weigh emotional intelligence way over GPA and GRE score. It's so vastly different, and that's why I encourage you to from early on to kind of start looking at these, trying to find these things out. Schools also have a wide variety of interview styles. Some, again, just do personal questions and EQ testing. Some actually have you take an emotional intelligence test right there on the spot. They have a written math course, some of them have a on-the-spot essay. Some of them will give you clinical scenarios or like mock codes that they want you to run. It's just so widely different. But again, kind of having a heads up and trying to figure these things out is going to benefit you as much as you can possibly find out. But yes, there is a wait list. Some schools do wait lists, and some schools won't tell you the order on the wait list, meaning you don't know if the wait list is a wait list of 20 or a wait list of 5. You don't know if you're the last on that wait list. You don't know if you're the first one on the wait list.
Yeah,
it's challenging.
It is. It's frustrating. And so that's where it takes the focus and the like keep your eye on the prize kind of mentality, because you do have to kind of, that's why it's nice to prepare ahead, because you don't want to find out that, oh, I missed a deadline and now I'm waitlisted, and who knows when that'll be.
Right. If you do get waitlisted, I always tell my students, that's good. I'm not saying that obviously it's not good. You want to get in, but holy cow, be proud of yourself. They want you. They just don't have room for you. The program is limited in size. So congratulations. I mean, the fact that you get waitlisted, it means they want you. So, I think that should be a pat on the back and a high five that they actually want you, and they're saying they'll accept you if they can make room.
And I see that as an opportunity to be like, okay, what can I do between now and the time they might look at my application again that gives me any kind of competitive edge?
Yep, exactly.
So getting into these schools, I know it can be kind of daunting, but we just need to remember we got to keep our eyes on the prize, and we need to, just pay attention to everything that's necessary to do this. And then, the day comes when they're like, yay, you're in, we want you.
Exactly.
And then you get to have like a little mini heart attack and dance party all at the same time.
Yes.
That's how I felt. I had a similar experience getting into just my ADN program, where it took me, there was so much frustration and prereqs and paperwork and nonsense. And then when I finally got in, I was like both absolutely overjoyed. And then I was like, oh my God, now I got to do it. Now the thing that I've been talking about for so long is here and I have to show up.
Yes, yes, it is. Oh, everyone has that fear. I mean, holy cow. Yeah, it's a big taking that. It's like, it's scary because it's unknown. You know, you hope you can do it. You want to do it, but there's always that fear of what if I fail, you know?
So what did you do when you found out you got in? Like, what were the first things that you did? Like, who did you tell? What was your excitement process? I want to feel the celebration all over again.
I'm pretty sure I cried because I was like, not in a sad way, but just overwhelming, happy and like relief. In fact, even thinking about it makes me want to cry again. Cause I just, such an overwhelming, joyful feeling thinking, holy cow. I literally, I still have that letter. I actually have it framed on the back of my diploma.
Yeah, I bet. Absolutely. And rightfully so.
Yeah. When I was in school, when I was facing some of my more harder moments, my burnout moments, I would look at that letter and say, Jenny, you earned this. You're going to pull yourself together and you're going to do this. And there's no turning back now. You got to push through. And I mean, you work so hard to get into school. So it's like, there was nothing that was going to stop you at that point.
What's that saying? You didn't come this far to only come this far.
Exactly.
Like you gotta, yeah. And that's just it. Like, that's good that you had that visual reminder, because I'm sure there are points where you're like, I just want to get a latte and go lay on the couch.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, a lot of those moments. But no, my husband, honestly, I had the support of him through it all. It's funny, when we got married in 2010, I knew I wanted to go back to school. So I told him before I graduated, we've been together since we were 18. So we knew we were going to get married. And I said, if you make me wait till after grad school to get married, you're going to have to buy me an additional round for every year. So he proposed to me pretty quickly after that. And yeah, but he was a great support system. And I shared my excitement with him because he knew all the tears that were shed over the rejection and doubt and fear that I went through trying to gain acceptance. So yeah, it was, and honestly, I was scared to start school. I was more excited than scared. And school was hard, but it wasn't, it was doable. I'm not saying I'm not going to feather coat or sugar coat things. Feather coat, that's, I don't want to feather coat anything. But yeah, I mean, school, it's the sheer volume of stuff they throw at you that makes it really hard. And trying to juggle time management and trying to figure out what study techniques work for you and being proactive and clinical and not getting kind of you're going to get burnout, but students who kind of slack in the realm of not taking time to go pre-op their patients or look up the case the night before, you can definitely tell those things. And, you can make your life a little bit more miserable if you're not on top of your game in clinical, because you're going to get kind of nailed by both the CRNA and the attending.
I was watching a vlog of another CRNA, and they said exactly that same thing. Like, if you have a student that hasn't read up, like, you may have had like a procedure where like this is the most common way they do the anesthesia, but then maybe they do it this other way instead, but you only studied the one way. And now they're like, oh, clearly you didn't go over this information. So it can be scary to think like, oh, I got to be prep. But then again, if you just make a habit to prep. And
yep. And I had students that I knew of that went into like, say, a really big case that they should be honored and privileged to be able to do, and they didn't prepare and they were asked to leave. They didn't get to do that day. And I even had times where I prepared the night before and I was all ready, got there early, pre-op my patient, got my drips, was ready to go. And I got kicked out of the room by the resident. And I had to go put my tail between my legs. And I told my chief CRNA and then, the attending, and I had to go find another case. And then I got into another case kind of cold and got drilled all day long. And I'm like, it just stinks. I wasn't ready for this case. And I had to go in here just because my case got stolen. Those kind of things do happen. And so school can be really hard. It can be really stressful. I'm not going to lie that several times after clinical, I'd go in my car and I'd cry because like during the day, it might not even have been a bad day, but I was just so stressed. I held it together and I kept a smile on my face, and I did the work and went to my car. By the time I went to my car, I just bawled because I was so overly stressed all day.
And that's just it. Like, some people think that like tears either have to be like this really joyous or this really sad occasion. But I feel like tears sometimes are just like a pressure release valve for a lot of us. Like, I've had tears just because I'm like so frustrated. Like, I'm not sad. I'm not happy. I'm just like, I'm so pissed, but the only way it'll come out, I've got such a potty mouth, but the only way it'll come out in an appropriate, non-offensive way in work is in tears.
Yeah.
So I've had that. I think we all have had that moment of like, where you like start to look up. You don't want the tears to roll down. So what do you do? Your eyes go up, and then, but you know what? Even though you had that moment, I'm sure that it gave you a lot of lessons in how to be prepared. And even though you might have those moments, it's not about you personally. They're not saying like, you're a bad person.
Correct.
They're saying like, we need you to be 100% on your game for this patient whose life is literally in our collective hands. Yeah. And so I think that's reasonable, but yeah, you gotta make sure you slept the night before, you didn't go out drinking, you read up on your case, because we always have those feelings of like, oh, I just want to go to dinner and not have to, but the dedication has to be there, and that has to be like a constant reminder.
It is. And it's what's hard is too the duration. So I think it's easier to be dedicated to something for a shorter period of time, but when you're talking 2 to 3 years, it's flat out burnout point, to the point of, it's like sometimes I remember being like, oh God, how am I going to pick myself? But you kind of become like a robot. You just kind of get into the motion of doing things, and you don't have time to really question. You just do it because you get so busy that you just do and do and do and go and go and go. So you don't think, oh, I'm going to quit. You don't even have time to think about quitting. You're just going to keep doing it.
You've got too much on your to-do list to think about not doing anything on your to-do list.
Yeah. And it's so rewarding when you're done that, oh my gosh, I have never met one CRNA who regrets their decision. I have had CRNAs tell me they regret how much debt they have.
Yeah, but that's not a problem with the position. That's a problem with the system.
Oh, for sure.
That it takes to get there.
But I also think that with proper planning and being careful about what school you pick, like particularly the CRNA that I am friends with, she has 3 degrees and they're all from private institutions. Mm-hmm. So that's why she has an outrageous amount of student loan debt, not because she picked. Now there are $200,000 CRNA schools. I'm not, that is out there. But know yourself, know your own finances. If that's the only school in town, be maybe willing to travel somewhere else, to go to a more affordable school. But yeah, as far as the career path, holy cow, it's awesome.
And I do know lots of people that move for grad school because this is an important investment in your life and your career.
Oh, for sure.
I also know people, this was another thing I wanted to ask you about. I know folks who have also moved or traveled or lived in a different place for a period of time for their clinical experiences. I know that there are many graduate programs that do not set up your clinical experiences for you. And I know that's a school by school thing. Like, you just have to determine what your program requires. But I know one person who, for her nurse practitioner program, granted a different program, but she had to travel and live out of state for like 2 months to get all of her clinical experience done because the type of program she was in required that she not be in the area she lived in.
Gotcha.
So how did your kind of clinical work go? Were you, and you don't have to go into too much personal detail, but I'm just wondering like what the structure was.
Yeah,
and
sure. And so all schools are going to be a little different, like you said, but for the most part, for anesthesia school, I do not know. They have to arrange your clinical for you, so that's never going to be on you. But that being said, there's a program like Texas Wesleyan, and they have, over like 50 or 60 different clinical sites throughout the country.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So you don't have, like, for instance, I just spoke with a CRNA who lived in Colorado, got into Texas Wesleyan, and then went back and did most of his clinicals in Colorado, where he was originally from, but also maybe traveled to like Arizona and a couple other out-of-state places. They don't necessarily always provide housing when you do these things. Some schools do. So that's kind of a iffy, you may or may not get housing as a student. But like my program, the furthest I had to travel was 2 hours away. And I did that in a day. I just would get up, at 4 what time did I get up? I probably got up at like 3:30 or 4 in the morning. And then I was leaving my house 5, 6, 7. Well, no, I was leaving the house at 4, getting to 4:30 and getting to clinical at 6:30 on those days. So I was probably getting up at like, I don't know, 3:45 in the morning.
And what time zone are you in? What part of the country are you in?
Eastern.
Okay, right on. Yeah. So so you have to plan for this. You got a heck of a commute ahead of you.
Yeah, I study in the car, put my headphones in.
Yeah, get your game face on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you do potentially have to travel. Not all programs will do that. I know of programs who all their sites are within 15, 20 minutes away. So again, that's why to do your thorough research when you're picking out your program you want, will definitely help.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what were those? So as you're going through your clinical program, the clinical portion of your program, was there a point at which you felt like, I don't know, I feel like everyone has this turning point of like, oh, I'm starting to get this. This is starting to actually click and make sense. And this is becoming a reality. Like,
yeah,
I mean, sure. you must have had that moment of like, oh my God, I'm actually going to be a CRNA someday sooner rather than later.
Right. I would say, gosh, it took me like when I first got into the operating room and was expected to be intubating and doing A-lines and all this, not that you do A-lines on your first day in clinical, but
right.
Either way, I felt like a fish out of water because it's something you've never done before. You forget to do silly things. Like you would intubate, but then you would forget to flip them on the ventilator or something, like you would just be so focused on, oh, I got the tube, I got to tape it now. And then you forget to actually ventilate the patient. But I would say probably by my senior year. So I went to a 28-month program. And so about a year in, I realized that, oh my gosh, I can not only do this, but I can do this independently. Meaning after spending about a year, now initially we start off in the OR 1 day a week. We went to 2 days a week, 3 days a week. And by the time you're a senior, you start 4 days a week with 1 day a week of class. By the time I got to be my senior year, I felt comfortable managing 80% of anesthesia cases. Now that didn't include my specialties like pediatrics, open heart, OB, those specialties. I felt like in regional anesthetic where you do like peripheral nerve blocks. I definitely felt like I needed more time to get more comfortable with those specialty areas, but to go and do a lap chole was like nothing. Like I didn't even sweat it. It wasn't a big deal. So I would say about a year in, and then by the time I was getting ready to graduate, no, I didn't. Even when you graduate, you don't feel comfortable doing everything because you haven't done everything or you've only done it a little bit. Like, for example, I only had 5 epidurals in my program, like labor epidurals. And I was devastated. I was like, oh, I'm going to be a terrible CRNA.
Oh.
Like I got my numbers because I went to Nationwide Children's Hospital. And I got coddles, and coddles counted towards my epidural numbers. But I just felt devastated that I had such a bad rotation. And I just did mostly C-sections. I didn't do a lot of labor epidurals. Anyhow, and same with my open heart, I didn't have a good open heart rotation. I thought devastated because I knew I wanted to do open heart anesthesia. And 6 months after I graduated, I joined an open heart team where we did 24-hour shifts. So I had a lot of OB. And I started cross training with CRNAs to do hearts and OB. And within a month of cross training, I was 110% comfortable doing all of those things on my own. So I think I want to say that because just because you don't get the best experience as a student does not mean you're not going to be able to do it as a CRNA. You're always learning. Every day you're on the job, you're learning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to be able to see things when you have kind of like the safety net of a school, a preceptor, whatever, whoever that clinician is that's with you. But yeah, you're never going to achieve every single thing you need to just in the confines of school. So there has to be an expectation that you have to be adaptable. You have to be willing to constantly learn. So I think that's really important to know, because there are so many points along the program where, any program where you feel at one moment you're like, oh, I don't know, what did I get myself into? And then, something happens and a day goes by, a few days go by, and you're like, okay, that was maybe dramatic. Like
Yeah.
I'm still fully in the game. I think I was just hungry or needed coffee or something.
Yeah.
So then, you get yourself through this program, and you have basically, it's like, okay, so I tell everybody, no matter what program you're in, you have this, like, if you have to have a licensing exam or any kind of testing to like fully practice, there's this like joy of graduating, and then you have this kind of like blissed out period where you're like, I got a job. And then you start the job. And then you're like, oh yeah, I gotta be busy and learning and totally feeling out of place again. What are some things that you would say to people that maybe are at that stage where they're like about to graduate, they have to start thinking about where they're going to be, do programs, again, the disclaimer that everything's different by program. Do you get assistance finding job placement, anything, recommendations? What does that all look like?
Sure. So I guess from two perspectives, I mean, if you're newly going to be graduating nursing school, if CRNA is your ultimate goal, I would definitely shoot to be working in an adult ICU of some kind. A lot of people make the mistake and go to the ER, NICU, or PICU, or they even think OR or PACU would count. But not all. Cath lab, PACU, and OR don't count at all for any programs. ER, NICU, PICU only count for some programs, and even at that, it's usually on an individual basis. Mm-hmm. So adult ICU is always going to be your best bet, and it could be any adult ICU. It could be a burn unit, it could be a CT, a CVU, or a CCU, or a MICU, or SICU, or there's so many different letter combinations. Right. But as long as it's adult neuro, neuro counts. But yeah, I would shoot for a nurse's aide job and then go to an externship and then straight to the ICU, or get your year on the floor, or a step down is probably what I would recommend before you jump into the ICU at the minimum, and do it that way. But as far as SRNAs who are getting ready to graduate, I think I always tell my students to take a deep breath, because they have spent 2 years preparing. They make you start a board preparation your first day of class. I'm not joking.
I believe.
They make you buy a board prep course, whether it be Apex or Prodigy, or there's so many out there right now. Valley's a great one, but they make you start that from pretty much day one. You are so freaking smart the day that you graduate. As long as you've done the work they've told you to do during the course, and you haven't, I think the people that struggle the most are the crammers. People that cram don't tend to have a good long-term memory, because if you cram, you'll know it and you'll be able to ace a test, but you're going to have issues when it comes to your final. And same with board preparation. You got to play the long game. You got to take the time and write out your notes and make the flashcards and make the acronyms and make the mnemonics and draw out graphs and just learn stuff in a way that you can reason through it. And my program director used to say, anesthesia school is like building a Christmas tree. The first year, you just get the tree up. The second year, you put the ornaments on, and then right before you get ready to graduate, you put the tinsel on the tree. And it's very true. Yeah. So
that's a great analogy. I like that.
Thanks. Yeah.
Just get the tree up the first year. Just get that tree in the base and get it standing up straight. Yeah. That's it. That's what you got to do this year.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I think I also had a good friend of mine. She's an excellent CRNA and excellent student. And she always had straight A's. She had straight A's through high school, straight A's through college, was a labor and delivery nurse for almost 10 years and went back to the ICU for 3 years before she went to anesthesia school. And our very first semester, we took a advanced pathophysiology course the semester leading into our program to kind of lighten our load that first semester. And I'm so thankful I did that, because it was a really, really brutal, hard class. And she got a C, and she was devastated because she had never gotten a C ever in her entire life. And she knew that this program had a policy that if you have any more than one C, it's an automatic out. And so she developed such severe test anxiety for the duration of the course, the poor thing, that we only had 2 people in my class of 44 who didn't pass boards. Unfortunately, she was one of them, but it had nothing to do with her lack of knowledge. It had to do with her anxiety. I mean, she even went on beta blockers and things like
Man,
that.
can I relate? Same.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
I don't get test anxiety, but I do know how it feels to have like maybe I think that doing the skills test outs, even though I did just fine at skills test outs in nursing school, there was one, the only one that I didn't pass. I didn't do anything wrong.
Mhm.
But my anxiety was so bad that I was like, I just need to stop. And she was like,
Yeah.
you haven't screwed up yet. And I was like, I just can't. So I can relate. This is,
Yeah.
but yeah, you need to find ways to persevere through that because you don't want that to be the thing holding you back.
I know. It was hard. The thing is, this, again, the same person had job offers at every clinical rotation she was at because she's just that good. But it just goes to show that, even someone who has a history of being book smart can still struggle in the end if it comes down to anxiety or something like that out of your control. So I think I tell a lot of my senior students to just trust the fact that they know enough to pass boards. And if they can go into this test with confidence, they're going to have less anxiety. So yeah, that's what I try to tell my students. And
It's very
as far as
important.
job placement, most students have a job within 6 months before they even graduate, at least in Ohio. Other states, I don't know if that's always the case. I think California has different rules. I spoke with a CRNA who I think didn't get a job until she was a couple months after graduation, but most, or I should say all the students in Ohio always have jobs before they even graduate. So it's never usually an issue with jobs.
Yeah, and it's always important to find out what other students have done as well because like at those open houses and those networking events to think about these things and talk about these things with people that are already in the profession.
Yeah,
These
definitely.
are important things to plan for. And I think that in terms of that confidence, I think that does come a lot from what we've talked about not trying to cram, about really internalizing this information, making sure that you not just know a series of facts, connections, and correlations, but that you can actually like walk yourself through the
Mhm.
things that you need to do. And it's also nice, you mentioned, sorry, I'm just jumping back for a second. You mentioned that some days they make you like do a thing that you might not normally do, but it's
Mhm.
really important to have the understanding of those other pieces and to have the understanding of how you need to interact with that person.
Oh, for sure.
Um, so I think that I just wanted to call back to that point because I was
Yeah,
jotting down notes here, but
yeah.
yeah. And so then, you have to walk in. It's just like with the only licensing exam I've taken, of course, is the one to get my RN, my registered nurse. But I know that if your heart's beating 125 beats a minute, you're
Right.
not going to you're not going to recall this information, even if you know it like the back
Mhm.
of your hand. So yeah, it's really important to just kind of do what you can. And it's funny you say beta blockers because I did the beta blockers too. And my God,
I
that
probably should have.
it just made me feel like I was panicking in slow motion.
Oh no. Oh gosh. Well, then I'm glad I didn't do that. Gosh. But I actually want
So
to
for
tell
some
you.
people, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'll share a funny story. Well, actually, one thing I want to go back on before I forget is that another piece of advice is to use every day when you're in the clinical setting, whether you're a nursing student or an SRNA, is to use it as a job interview. It's a long-term job interview. So just remember that. Be a team player, help out. Don't sit on your phone in the break room. Go offer a CRNA, even a bathroom break would be a nice gesture. Or, hey, my case got canceled. Can I come do your airway or your A-line? Or just seeking out different skills and activities that they can do will go a long way. But back to anxiety. So my first 10 minutes taking my boards, I was having a panic. I do have panic attacks. It's something that I've dealt with. So I do have anxiety in my history.
Mm-hmm.
I've always just kind of just dealt with it. And I'm like, oh, it's annoying. Like I can't breathe. I know it'll be fine in a minute if I just chill out. But I sat there and I remember they make you wear those earphones,
Yeah.
I remember like, God, these earphones have to be like jumping off my head right now. Because my heart is beating so hard and so fast. I can feel my headphones moving
Yeah.
on my head. And I kept deep breathing. I'm sure, I don't know what I sounded like because I had my earphones on. So like everyone around me, if they were probably like, like I'm sitting there like dry heaving, like just trying to breathe. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm screwing up. I kept rereading, thinking I was reading it wrong. And oh my gosh, I was a total mess thinking I'm going to fail this test because I can't calm my freaking self down.
Your sympathetic nervous system is like betraying you in this moment.
Oh, for sure.
Completely.
About 15 minutes in though, I was finally able to get my heart rate. I was able to get under control, and I'm like, dang it. But I mean, if I would have gotten all the questions, I would have been in trouble because I spent 15 minutes in the beginning just having a panic attack.
So. And they have like cameras pointed at you when you're taking these. So I'm sure that those cameras, I know they don't I don't think they record them, or I don't know what they do with them, but you got to believe there's got to be at least a collection out there of people that are straight up like crying. Oh man, I cried during a chemistry exam once. I just softly, like sobbed over the chemistry. Sorry.
That's okay. I hate chemistry too. So especially OChem.
Yeah. Oh man. The only thing that got me through OChem was the fact that I had a really good looking professor. I was in the third row every morning at 7 a.m.
Like with your coffee ready to just start staring away.
Hated the class, but boy, did I show up. Yeah. So then anyway, back to what we were talking about. So then, so you take this licensing exam. Then there's this period of like holding your breath of like, did I pass? Did you, I feel like with the first round of boards that we go through as nurses, everybody kind of walks out with some level of thinking like, I don't know if I passed that. Mm-hmm. What's it like? I mean, I know that it's a different program entirely, but did you walk out of there going, not too bad?
No, when my test shut off, I mean, I had the minimum questions, which I couldn't even be wrong about this. I'd have to remember, but as like 100 question might be the minimum. I felt pretty, because I got some hard. So the test, obviously, just like all these tests, they're kind of tailored to when you're doing well. It'll try to find your weak points. So it'll actually get harder. And my test got really freaking hard. And I was like, holy cow. And even to the point where I got this one test question where I'm like, this has to be a guinea pig question. I'm just going to totally guess and move on because I haven't never even ever learned this ever before. It's about pacers. And what I would try to do when I read any kind of test question is I read the question and I don't look at the answers. I just try to answer it in my head. And so I remember reading this question being like, oh, I got this. I know pacemaker modes. I know all about it. And then I read like the options for me to pick from. And I'm like, huh? Like what? I don't know. Like maybe Medtronic
none
rep.
of them.
Yeah. A Medtronic rep or a St. Jude's rep might know this, but I don't know this. And so I mean, when it shut off, even though, I was still nervous, I was pretty confident that I did well. I mean, I knew it shut off at the minimum, so I either majorly bombed it or I passed. Those were like the two.
Yeah, those are only two options.
Yeah, so I had a pretty good feeling I passed. I think if I went all the way to the maximum, I think I would have for sure been total panicky, sobbing mess, walking to that printer.
Yeah, you're like, my heart can't take it.
Yeah.
This is a big deal. You pass that test and you've, in your case, you've got like this job lined up. Now that you're in your position, like what are your, everybody's got to worry about like the continuing education stuff. So like, okay, now what do I have to do to make sure that I actually can keep this license certification? So it's a license, correct? Or it's a certification, right?
Yes. So, I mean, it's a license. It's a certification and a license technically because I'm still practicing under my RN license. I just now have an advanced practice license as well that has the anesthesia certification on it. Mm-hmm. So you do have to have like 80 CME and some more to get in all those details, like either class A or class B. And there's different ways to get class A credits versus class B credits. It's really not that big of a deal. They did just pass a thing though I don't know if it's every 6 or 8 years. I should know, considering I have to take it. It's either every 6 or 8 years you have to take a recertification exam. But from my understanding, you can take the exam more than once if you don't pass it the first time, and that it's not going to be as hard as boards. So that's my understanding. But I haven't done it yet. I've only been out for about 6 years now, and I'm coming up on needing to take it, I think, pretty soon.
Sure. So time to do some research on that. It sounds like.
Yeah, I know, right? Next year. I'll worry about next year.
And I know this also varies from state to state, but like, are the fees associated with it higher or lower than what you saw with your regular nursing license?
Oh, they're way higher. So it actually just increased, unfortunately, too. So the test when I took it was about $800. And now it's about $1,000, maybe even $700 to take the test, just to sit for the test. And then I probably pay, now most companies reimburse you for your education time. And like I am a member of the American Association of Nurse Anesthetists. So I pay $700 a year to be a member of that. But again, you can kind of use your work will reimburse some of those expenses. Most facilities will reimburse you for that.
And of course, you weigh out the things and the associations and affiliations that are most important to you. And most relevant, because I know a few people, there's a couple nurses that I know that they keep collecting associations every time they get a new certification. And, and I'm kind of like, well, you kind of got a lot there. Are you paying for all of those? Like that, that adds up. It's like, you have like subscriptions, like Netflix, Hulu, HBO. Well, she's got all of her nursing associations. So that can add up pretty quickly. But I mean, it sounds like this is something that, even though it's incredibly challenging, the rewards, you're well paid, you have good autonomy, you have this adventurous, you might be doing the same quote unquote job, but every person is different. Every case is different. You're not working with the same people. Don't work 5 days a week in the hospital necessarily. They're not working 9 to 5. So you have like each day, I imagine you have like a different group of people that you're working with. And so you do have this great variety in what you get to do and see and experience. And I think that's pretty cool. And it's all behind these doors. So you have this added magic of like secrecy. And I think people think of ORs as very like, ooh, I wonder what happens in there. You can't like picture, really what an operating room looks like. So I think that's a pretty cool place to be, where you've got this level of like, everybody knows what a nurse does. Everybody knows what anesthesia is. But just like nurses at the bedside, beyond
my OR nurses, they like take care of you for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I imagine you guys got to watch each other's backs.
Oh yeah.
I remember the day that they announced that we were talking about different positions that nurses have in the OR. And one of the nurses was like, the circulating nurse, part of her job is to make sure that there aren't any fires. And we were all like, what?
Yeah. Oh, it is.
But it's a huge risk.
Airway fires.
But you don't people, when they think about nurses and operating rooms, they don't think about nurses like monitoring for and responding to fire.
I know. I don't think anyone wants to know that information. It's kind of like, huh?
But they do, because you think about it,
it.
you have all these like high pressure gases, equipment, electricity. You for sure want a nurse who's paying attention to that. So I just think that's one of those interesting little things that like people, I'm going to put you on the spot here big time, but are there any things that you think like that are part of your job that people would really kind of be surprised or would find interesting?
One thing I kind of wanted to mention that one of my coworkers pointed out, I think people a lot of times ask, how do I know if it's the right fit for me to go into this? Because one thing I just want to point out is the fact that as an anesthesia provider, you typically are kind of like, you work by yourself quite a bit, not in a sense that you're not part of a surgical team, because you have the surgeon, you have, the PA, the resident, the circulating nurse, the surgical tech, and the OR nurse. So you're always around someone. But sometimes behind the drape, it's a little bit kind of solid. Like you're kind of by yourself. You're kind of just in your own little world sometimes. And you don't necessarily always get interaction with your coworkers unless you're taking a lunch break or, stuff like that. So sometimes they'll be like my friend at work and I won't see her almost all day. If we have a busy day, it'll just be in passing in the hallway. Whereas a nurse on a floor, it's not necessarily like that. So that can be kind of different as far as, and for me, I kind of like being by myself behind the drape. I kind of like just, but I'm not a real chatter normally either. I'm kind of an introvert, I would say. I kind of like minding my own business and only commenting when I have something pertinent to say. But yeah, so that maybe people don't realize that you're not always interacting with someone all the time. You're kind of sitting behind the drapes doing your anesthesia, not necessarily always chatting away. That, and then, there's a lot of political things. It's kind of a politically hot environment, and I don't really want to go into a lot of details about politics because I don't even think I'm qualified, know enough to really
same girl, same.
Yeah, but I mean, there's always that, which, just between the anesthesiologist and the CRNA and, we do work as a team, but there's a wide variety of practice out there, meaning they have all CRNA facilities where there's not even an anesthesiologist in the building. Then you have the other extreme where you're highly kind of what I would say micromanaged by the anesthesiologist, or you can even work with AAs, which are anesthesia assistants, which is kind of like people who maybe were pre-med can go then, or not even pre-med. I think you can have any bachelor's degree, to be quite honest, and go back to become an anesthesia assistant. So there's just a lot of things like that where sometimes it can kind of create some tension. But otherwise, as far as things you don't realize, I think getting ICU experience is going to be the reason why it's so important is because as an anesthesia provider, you are placed in these very quick, unexpected, high intense, high pressure, life and death situations. And so being an ICU nurse is pretty much prepping you for being able to handle yourself in those situations. The last thing you want is, let's just say you're having surgery. You don't want your CRNA or someone that's doing your anesthetic, when you code on the table, be like, and just freeze and not do anything.
Yeah, like, what do I do? Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. So you want someone who can be like, okay, I need this. We need to, look at why are they coding? Or is it PEA arrest? Are they hypovolemic? Are they severely anemic, or whatever the causes may be, and try to figure it out and not totally lose their cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I imagine also, maybe I'm oversimplifying. I almost said Oprah simplifying. Maybe I'm oversimplifying, but as an ICU nurse, you're exposed to, sedatives, paralytics, vasopressors. And so you have already some basic understanding of how all those things work together and the effects they have on the body. So I am only now starting to dabble in that information because of this cross training that I'm doing.
Oh, cool.
So I'm starting to learn. And so I was following a nurse the other night, and she was just kind of talking through her reasoning. Why would we go up on fentanyl as we're coming down on propofol? Different like things that was happening with the patient, looking at blood pressure and patient condition and respiratory rate. And so it's just nice if you already come from an environment where that's part of your language. I imagine that translates really well. So,
oh yes, it definitely helps you for sure. I think, like you said, it kind of you already have some of the Christmas tree stand in place.
Yeah. You got one of the legs on real nice and tight.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So anyone who's thinking about anesthesia, I just want to say that I have a Facebook group, and I probably should have mentioned this sooner, but
no, please do. You have the floor. Talk about it.
Okay. And I just want to briefly let you guys know that it's out there because, again, I started getting a lot of people coming to me, asking me questions, and I created the group. It's called ICU. So, the letter I and then the letter C and U. So ICU, Dreaming About Anesthesia. So it's on Facebook. Obviously anyone can join who's interested, and it's just a place to come to get your questions answered. The community is phenomenal. Like, I am very impressed with my community. We have about 5,000 members, and they're all just putting it all out there. And I think what I've tried to cultivate is an environment of not only safety, but openness. So if someone has an interview and they want to share some helpful tips, or it goes in open house, people share this information on here. So it's a really nice way. And I'm on there all the time. And I'm always going on there doing lives and answering questions. But it's just a really nice way to kind of figure this all out. And even if you don't know if this is what you want to do, it's a great way to figure it out risk-free. So you don't invest time and money into something that you then later on find out it's not for you.
Yeah. Get information right from the people that are working in the industry and doing all this work. I'm going to include the link to the group in the show notes so that people can actually find that information more easily. So you said it's ICU, Dreaming About Anesthesia.
Yeah. Yep.
Excellent. I love it. And those Facebook groups, I've seen a few of them. One of my friends started a group for traveling nurses, and it climbed to 10,000 strong. So there's a lot of power and networking and great information. Like, I'm not a traveling nurse, and I read those posts. Same with, I follow like an emergency first responders group. And even though I don't do these jobs, and I'm probably I'm not likely to ever work in an emergency department, I love learning about that side of it. I think that as nurses, we can always kind of take in other pieces of this big picture.
Yeah.
And I think this even though I could probably ask you questions for like 2 more hours, because I just find it so interesting. I think this is a really great, like, kind of bird's eye view of what you do. And when you contacted me about being on the show, I could just tell that it just sounded like an excited, passionate email. And I can tell that you really like what you're doing. And I think that is incredibly important, because this work is hard, especially now that we're in this weird time of like unprecedented medical and ethical stuff. I don't even know how to summarize all of it, but with the current pandemic, we're more important than ever. And it's more and more vital that we support each other and understand, there's that old joke that like when the floor nurse gets report from the OR or the ED, like everybody's kind of got a different language. They have a different way of managing lines, everything down to the way we
anesthesia makes Christmas lights out of
yeah.
line.
And then the ICU has to like organize and group everything again. But I guess the point is that if we're going to support each other, we need to do that by also like understanding where the other person is coming from and what they're experiencing. So even if there are listeners out there that are not going to take this information and run with it, it's really important to understand what's happening behind that magic curtain of the OR. So this has been awesome. I'm so glad we got to have this talk.
Me too.
I would love to have you back in the future, because like I said, I could probably ask you questions for like 2 more hours. So.
I would love to come back. It's been a pleasure, and I'm super excited to share, because yes, I love my career. I am really passionate about it. I love helping my students. Like literally in a selfish way, I almost get to kind of relive the excitement of getting an acceptance letter. Like when I help my student go from not getting an interview and then getting an interview and then doing a mock interview with them and then having them land that position, I'm literally jumping up for joy and like, hell yes, high five, let's drink a beer right now together kind of situation on my instant messenger. So it just brings me so much joy. And I love the community. And again, the fact that I know this is a very needed information that's just not readily available, or you're piecing it together little by little and maybe getting misguided, which is really unfortunate. So yeah, anytime.
This is great. Thank you so much. You guys, I want to remind you to check out the Facebook group, I See You Dreaming About Anesthesia. I'm actually going to check it out because I would love to read some of this.
I would love to have you there.
Awesome. And then also I'd like to remind people to go to the Nursing Uncensored website at nursinguncensored.com. We have so much stuff there. There's blog posts. I haven't done one in a while. I got to get on that. Vlogs. We've got old episodes, lots of content. So everybody, I actually had someone message me this week and go, "Oh my God, you have a lot of vlogs." And I was like, yeah, I do. They're weird, but I do.
Check them out. I don't think I've seen them yet.
It's because I'm not really great at self-promotion. I love talking about other people and spreading their links, and then I just never share anything that I've done. So, so check that out. But anyway, Jenny, thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to have had this talk. And at the very least, we could talk again on the show. But
I'll hopefully see you in the group, and I will be posting your blog in my group for all my members. So
excellent.
Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your evening, and we'll definitely stay in touch.
Excellent. And everybody, happy nursing. Here at Nursing Uncensored, we may be, uncensored, but we're not unfiltered. Protected health information has been changed and concealed to comply with HIPAA. The things we talk about are from years of experience with thousands of patients, things we've read, stories we've heard. If you think we're talking about you, we're not. Also, we're real nurses here to provide helpful and accurate information. But don't take anything we say as fact without doing your own research. Refer to your state's Board of Nursing, Practice Acts, and your institution's policies and procedures if you have questions about your practice. Lastly, our very strong opinions are ours alone and do not reflect those of our employers, educational, or professional institutions. Thanks for listening, and happy nursing, folks.